Welcome to Your Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays. It's Monday, June 8th, 2020. On today's show, you might have seen recommendations to support the Detroit Justice Center and the Bail Project on social media. But what's behind them and their greater mission? Today, an illuminating conversation with Williams and Erin Keith from the Justice Center. We also get into the topic of, does cash bail even need to exist? Or is there a better way? Sven Gustafson will join me for part of that conversation. Then, 3 things you should know around town. Let's get started. Joining me on the line, Williams and Erin Keith from the Detroit Justice Center and the Bail Project. Welcome to Daily Detroit.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So the Detroit Justice Center has been doing a lot of work in the community over the last, few years. And, this is something that, although the protests are happening today, this is something that you have been working for reform for a long time. So can you give people a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of what it is that your work centers on there at the Justice Center?
Sure. So in some respects, the Detroit Justice Center is a nonprofit law firm, and we provide a number of legal services to individuals who've been arrested, to returning citizens, to aspiring entrepreneurs. On the one hand, that's what we do. We also house a number of other distinct services. The Bail Project is one of them. My practice group is actually called Economic Equity, and our goal is to assist community organizations that are interested in developing new approaches to economic and community development. So taken as a whole, it's kind of best to describe Detroit Justice Center as an organization committed to making Detroit a more just city by addressing institutional barriers in everything from criminal justice system to our economy, our economic institutions.
And just to add to that, one of the approaches that we like to use to kind of characterize our work is what we call a defense, offense, and dreaming approach. So, of course, our defensive work would be direct representation. Our offensive work would be working to ensure that people have services and are engaged in our economy in an effective way. And the dreaming portion would be more so envisioning what could we do instead? How could we divest from the prison industrial complex and divest from policing and all of these things that we know don't work currently, and invest that money in things that do work, that have been researched, evidence-based programming, and things like that. So in terms of how I fit into that work, I'm in the legal services and advocacy practice. And so one aspect of our work is representing returning citizens in a variety of different matters, including low-level misdemeanor offenses, helping with child custody and child support matters, representing people in landlord-tenant hearings. And we also go into prisons and actually work with returning citizens before they are paroled to essentially do a legal checkup with them and ensure that they have the support they need to reenter successfully. We do community education, know your rights trainings in schools. And then as far as our advocacy work, we try to be responsive to the needs of the community. So testifying before different legislative bodies, publishing reports and white papers that educate people about the nuances of these issues. And then also, of course, lawyers love filing lawsuits. So where that is appropriate, joining with other community groups to advance those causes.
How have the consecutive nights of protest here in Detroit, and we've seen them spread to other cities like Troy. I know as we record this, there was expected to be one this afternoon in Warren. How have those affected the work you do at the Detroit Justice Center?
We stand with the community. We've been very engaged in trying to support them along with other organizations. Again, we're very big on partnership. Mm-hmm. So what we try to do is be responsive hand in hand with other organizations like NDS, like the National Lawyers Guild, like the National Conference of Black Lawyers, to provide any type of legal representation that we can. Know your rights trainings again on what to do during a protest, how to protect yourself, especially given the nuances of the COVID situation and the fact that this is very much a pandemic still brewing within a pandemic of racism and police brutality. So yeah. I think definitely overlap. And again, we're just trying to be responsive to the needs that are expressed. Tons of people emailing, reaching out, asking for bailout support. And again, just trying to help in whatever way we can to support what's going on.
Can you talk a little bit about some of your focus on prisons, especially during this pandemic? Because I know that's been a real issue of concern for the Justice Center. What have you guys been advocating for, and have you seen any success?
We're engaged with a number of other organizations as well as private firms who have joined together for the purposes of really suing to improve these jail conditions in light of COVID, and also to try to expedite getting people released, because as you can imagine, people don't have the ability to social distance while in jail. And so another misconception is that, oh, if you're in jail, you deserve to be there. Well, a lot of people are pretrial. And so without even getting into the politics of it all or what one's personal values are about jail, a lot of people have not been found guilty of a crime at all. And so they are being held there because they cannot afford bond. And so we're really just encouraging and have been very involved in trying to get these people released, in addition to improving the conditions so that people within the jails have access to things like masks, the ability to wash their hands, the ability to use tablets or other technology that are within the jail once those items have been sanitized. Things that are just basic like that, ensuring they have medical care, ensuring that they're actually being tested for the coronavirus. So those are some ways that we've been plugged in along with other organizations.
Let me also add that the impact the coronavirus has had on our economy and on our society in general has really kind of exposed the problems that were already there. And this is true throughout the criminal justice system. These problems didn't just happen now. And that's in part why the response has been so aggressive. These problems have been there from the beginning. We're talking about a failure of society in general to provide for generally healthy lives, safe places to live.
I think one of the key things through all of this, a key theme, at least to me, is that there is a litany of systemic issues. And there's multiple ways that you have to work to address them. It's not just about one particular program. And it really seems with the Justice Center, there's just really like an arms around approach on so much stuff.
Well, to some degree, you could say we crowdsource our approach. We have values that guide our organization as far as who our partners are. But our role is to support initiatives that are coming largely from the community and being able to provide basically technical assistance in many instances that they need to make ideas that they had work. And also we have an advocacy piece to educate. It's educating not only the general public, but also educating our political leaders, many of whom think of themselves as being elected to solve a particular problem and came in with an idea of an approach in mind. And sometimes you get tunnel vision. If you've always thought, oh, this is the way to fix that, and then you realize, wait, that isn't working. Our goal is part of the dreaming. We let people know that there are other approaches to what's being done.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about, especially because it's timely with everything that's happening right now in the country, is the bail project. And I wanted to start the conversation with the idea that money bail is at its base an unjust thing, and it's not done everywhere, even though we think about it because we're from the United States that, you know, money bail is what everybody does. But from at least the research I've done, it greatly tips the scales against poor people.
Absolutely. And there are even states and municipalities that do not use cash bail. They use other types of assessments or other types of determinations as to whether a person should be released. So bail is not the only way. It is not the best way. It's not the most effective way. It literally just criminalizes and holds people in jail for being poor.
The purpose of bail is to make sure that the person shows up for their trial, right? But if the person isn't a threat to flee, if they aren't, by any means a danger to the community, the default should be that that money bail isn't required. But the problem that we have is it's become so ingrained that that's the approach we take. We don't even question it. And what studies show is that if a person shows up for trial and they haven't had the opportunity outside of the jail to talk to their attorney, they are more likely to be convicted. If they show up coming from jail, they are more likely to be convicted. There are all these things that just double down on the oppressive nature of our judicial system. It comes down harder on people simply because they're poor. In a lot of instances, as we said, they haven't even gone to trial yet.
And for context, like I mentioned, we handle a lot of low-level misdemeanor offenses. And so perhaps you would think that bail doesn't apply that much, but I can literally attest firsthand that I have clients who have literally been charged prior to us making representations on the record that this amount should be lowered, but their bond or bail had been set at $750 for a single driving with a suspended license ticket. And this person is, potentially not working or is barely making above minimum wage and is expected to be able to pay that. Essentially becomes a barrier to them even litigating their case, because in some courts, the judges won't even allow you to come before them if you have not posted your bond or you don't have the ability to post your bond that day. And so a lot of times if people are unrepresented or are only represented by court-appointed counsel who they meet moments before they go in front of the judge, they feel very scared to even walk into court to handle their matter because they know they don't have the money and they don't want to be locked up.
I don't want to sort of go on and on about this, but you also have to think about the fact most Americans can't handle, there's been a press a lot lately, most Americans can't handle a $400 emergency. So if you suddenly find yourself locked up because you can't come up with $700 or $750, and let's say you were driving, your car has now been towed, you may lose custody of your children, you may have your utilities turned off. There are all these sort of rippling ramifications that come just because you got pulled out of your life and locked up for, arguably a considerable amount of time, and you haven't even had your day in court, and it's all because, in essence, you're poor.
So I want to look ahead at kind of two steps. I think first I want to talk about what is it that the Bail Project does and steps in. And then I think my follow-up question is going to be, what could we do differently from a reform perspective? So let's talk about the project first and the here and now and how it works and how people can get involved in it.
I can give a little bit of background. So the Bail Project is a national organization that has local offices. And so the Detroit Justice Center hosts the local office of the Detroit Bail Project. And so there are people called bail disruptors who work in the office, who do a fantastic job of literally being on the ground, being responsive to people who need to be bailed out. Typical criteria is that the person have a bond less than $5,000 and not have other holes in certain places, meaning other municipalities, other states. And if they do have those holes, it's just a matter of how can those things be addressed. Then the Bail Project also provides wraparound support to ensure that these people are able to actually get to court for their hearings. Because again, a lot of times people don't not show up because they don't want to come. Sometimes they don't have transportation. So the Bail Project will even provide transportation. It will provide reminder phone calls, all these things to ensure that a person is actually able to participate in their court process. So in terms of participating, a lot of people make donations to the Bail Project or to DJC earmarked for the Bail Project in terms of our local office. And then also, the Bail Project works with volunteers, especially around Mother's Day, Father's Day, and other big opportunities for like Mama's Day bailout or Father's Day bailout, things like that.
What could we do better? What is a better alternative long term? And of course, I'm going to put a link to all of this stuff in the show notes so that people can support and donate and do things like that. But looking at it from a systemic point of view, getting into the weeds here, what could we do better? What do you think are good changes that could be done here in Detroit, Michigan, and America?
People could start off by voting for elected officials who recognize that cash bail is a flawed approach to community safety. It doesn't further community safety. It doubles down on mass incarceration. And there's a whole industry that's grown up around it. And sometimes it appears that elected officials are more sensitive to the concerns of bail bondsmen than they are of the people who find themselves needing to post bail. So being aware of the political stances of elected officials who are concerned with this is probably the most important first step.
Here's the thing that I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about the listener here who has so been used to the cash bail system. And so you're looking at it as we can abolish this and this will be a greater thing. We don't need to necessarily replace it with something else.
Correct. I think that judges have the expertise to make a determination, not using a assessment tool or something that has inherent racial bias, because that's another problem, is that a lot of these risk assessment tools that are used by jurisdictions to try to move away from cash bail actually have factors such as, has this person ever associated with known criminals? Like, they're very subjective, broad factors that don't necessarily have any bearing on whether this person is a risk. But a judge could easily ask at a hearing where cash bail is not at play, what type of family support do you have in the community? Do you need any type of treatment or addiction support that would enable you to get your life back on track. Like, there's so many better questions we could ask with regard to this issue of public safety than like, how much money do you have today to put down so we don't send you to jail? That's just not the right question.
No, I really appreciate learning about this and being able to share that message with folks. If people want to get in touch, want to put money your way, all of that kind of stuff, what can they do?
You can donate directly to the Detroit Justice Center and to the Bail Project. I mean, you can donate directly to either of those programs and enable us to keep doing the work that we do. The Bail Fund is a revolving fund. So after the person shows up, the money goes back into the fund to be used for the next person. So contributions help enlarge the fund so more people at once can benefit from it.
And I'd also say, from really a more hands-off approach, if you're just getting familiar with kind of what criminal justice reform is, I encourage you to follow our social media pages because, again, it's about learning. It's actually an unlearning of all the things we've been taught about what safety looks like, right? And so that's one of the things DJC is really big on, is re-educating ourselves about what is best practice. What are the options? And so I welcome your listeners or the community at large to just begin that process of thinking differently about these factors.
Well, Erin Keith, Eric Williams, I really appreciate you spending so much time with us today. I hope that folks have learned something about something that they need to unlearn over the last bit. And I really appreciate your time.
Our pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Here are 3 things to know today. Across Metro Detroit, peaceful protests and marches brought out tens of thousands of people between the city and the suburbs over the weekend. In Livonia, a suburb that's more than 90% white with a long history of racial issues like sundown laws, more than 2,000 people are reported to have come out along 5 Mile Road over the weekend. Another large protest that drew about 4,000 people was along Hall Road in Macomb County. Plus, there was a peaceful march across the Belle Isle Bridge. Saturday night, and I know this as friends went, portions of the march in downtown Detroit turned into an actual dance party. Incidents between police and protesters have greatly declined when curfews are not enforced by police through physical and chemical means. Meanwhile, in Shelby Township, where controversial police chief Robert Shalit still serves after calling protesters barbarians through a dummy account, there was a pro-Trump rally of a few hundred people. If you owe fees at the 36th District Court in Detroit, an amnesty program has begun today and runs through July 10th. The amnesty means that if your judgment is paid in full, warrant, penalty, and late fees will be waived. This is for misdemeanors and civil cases. This does not cover driver's license reinstatement fees. Payments need to be made online at 36districtcourt.org, and of course, we'll put a link in the show notes. A reminder that today is the day where restaurants, bars, museums, libraries, and more can legally open if they want to in Michigan. Some already did this morning at 12:01 a.m. These places are opening at 50% capacity. Strict social distancing guidelines are in place, and expect that your server will wear a mask. Now, be sure if you're thinking about going out to check if your favorite place is actually open. A number of establishments have done the math and figured that 50% capacity isn't enough to make financial sense. Also, some places were mid-renovation project or haven't been able to ramp up in time to swing their doors open. A personal note right here, if you're eating or drinking out, tip your server really well. They're only getting half the table as they normally would and are putting themselves out there in a big way. The pandemic's not over yet, and I'm personally going to do double what I normally would. All right, that will do it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. Also, thank you to new members, Dave and SJ, who both joined us at patreon.com/dailydetroit. It is much appreciated, and it's a key part of pushing Detroit's conversation forward. Thank you so much. With that, I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll get through this together. Talk with you tomorrow.